Welcome to Dog Day Afternoon. I'm Gilles Gallant with BetsTV and FTNBets. You can follow me on Twitter at GDawg5000. And it's the betting show where we're going to be talking NFL, give some sports betting advice, a couple picks along the way. We got Thanksgiving games coming up, so we'll definitely be able to give you a couple leans and picks for that. And the main thing I want to stress about Dog Day Afternoon is we do not, I repeat, we do not take things too seriously around here. It is a football betting show after all. Let's keep it casual here. And we're going to talk about the latest odds in the NFL, some futures as well coming up in the show. But before we get started, I want to introduce my guest, the one and only, the paper chaser, the sports betting analyst for OddsShark, Joe Osborne. Joe, welcome to the show, man. Welcome back.
Hey, buddy. Yeah, I was just reading through some Twitter replies. I put out a tweet this morning saying that, you know, if the NBA could take the Knicks off the Christmas Day schedule a couple years ago when they did that, it might have been last season actually, but I said the NFL should take the Lions off the Thanksgiving Day. I know it's a tradition, but hey, it's a crappy tradition. But I put that out there on Twitter and a lot of Lions fans came at me kind of mad. But come on, guys, you got to be realistic. It's pretty crappy entertainment the past couple of years with the Lions in these Thursday afternoon games, right?
Can always count on you first thing Tuesday morning to rile up Lions Twitter. I did not realize that was first off, I figured they would just be happy that they get exposure on Thursdays. But I mean, at 0-8-1, really, I'm not saying you should be able to flex the schedule, but yeah, I'm with you right there. That should have been an apparently topic. I should have brought that up. Thank you. Great take. Great take, Joe. Well, we're going to stick with some hot takes because I've got some hot takes that I've noticed after 11 weeks. And it's a little segment we call Apparently. And the first thing that I thought that was apparent to me, now, Joe, apparently the Chiefs were good all along. Didn't even need to watch the first 10 weeks of the season. You know, they're just right back in the fold, right at the top of the pecking order in the AFC. I mean, their defense over the last 4 games, only 47 points given up. They lead the AFC West now. They're 1 game back of the 1 seed. Joe, is it apparent it is to you as it is to me that the Chiefs were just good all along?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think they went anywheres in terms of they didn't just all of a sudden become a bad team, right? They weren't covering the spread, so a lot of bettors weren't liking them. And they were also having a lot of bad turnover luck, right? Like, of course, some of those turnovers were bad and on Mahomes and the guys fumbling the balls. But how many of those turnovers, you know, were tip passes, you know, hit a defensive lineman in the head, it bounces up in the air, like weirdo plays like that happening. And, you know, they hit their bump in the road this season, and now they appear to have rebounded from that. You know, the defense has looked pretty good, and we're all prisoners of the moment when it comes to the NFL. It's such a week-by-week league, right? Like this time last year, not a whole lot of people are pointing at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers saying, hey, that's the team that's going to win the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay went on a 1-3 stretch in November of last year. They also, late October last year, they had that embarrassing game. They lost to the Bears on Thursday Night Football when Tom Brady couldn't remember what down it was, right? So people got to keep this in mind. It's you got to look at the bigger sample sizes. Yeah, Kansas City is still very much a threat. No one wants to see them in the playoffs, I don't think.
Exactly. And I think that prisoner of the moment point that you brought up was huge because the only putting up 3 points, for example, on the Titans, that loss, I think everybody, if you even had a Chiefs ticket at that point, you were considering ripping it up, you know, because you just thought there's no way that they can come back from that. And then even the game against the Packers, they didn't look that great. You know what I mean? Just offensively, even against the Cowboys, You can say they didn't look that great, 19 points. But the fact that their defense, like Frank Clark and Chris Jones, have just been playing unreal. And now you look at their schedule the rest of the year, they've got the Broncos twice, the Raiders, Steelers, and Chargers remaining. Those feel like a lot of W's right now. So I think the Chiefs are very much in distance to be able to get maybe even the 1 seed in the AFC. We're going to talk about the Chiefs a little bit later here in the future section. But, Joe, I've got another scalding hot take. I think that you're going to enjoy this one. Apparently, Carson Wentz is the best quarterback in the AFC. I'm just saying this right now. Like in the last 8 games with the Colts. No, hear me out. Hear me out. Again, all of these have a disclaimer of hear me out before we get to the end here. But I guess if you look at the last 8 games since they went into Miami and won there, 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Colts are 6-2. But I mean, they're 6-5 on the season. They lost obviously their first 3 games. He's got the highest completion percentage in 3 seasons. And I mean, even in those two losses, they had a 14-point lead in the second half on Baltimore and Tennessee. So, Joe, is it apparent to you as it is to me? Carson Wentz, best quarterback in the AFC. Lock it in.
No, I mean, we got to give this guy credit. He's cleaned it up a lot, right? Only 3 interceptions on the season. And Carson Wentz, he's one of these guys who uses a punching bag. You know, people can't wait to throw him under the bus, but he's cleaned it up and he's not killing the Colts. You know, he's keeping them in these games by protecting the football. But in terms of like, if you want to put him into like a quarterback tier, you got to put him in with like the Baker Mayfields and Jimmy Garoppolo's of the world. But, you know, he's playing clean football. And when you have a running game like the Colts do, then that's a pretty good combination, right? So, yeah, I wouldn't quite go that far. I wouldn't have him in any type of MVP discussion, but he's cleaned it up, and you got to give him credit. He's bounced back pretty nicely. He's in a pretty good system designed to help him out, I guess, right? So we can give him some credit for that for sure.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why I was saying the best is that part of the reason why I'm falling back into favor with Carson is not making those boneheaded plays of trying to force. I mean, you still see every once in a while, specifically against the Titans game, where he threw that left-hand shovel pass thing or whatever he was trying to do, and it was one of the most inexplicable turnovers you saw by a quarterback this year. But I think that's the one thing is that every once in a while he'll have that brain fart, but you just haven't been seeing it a lot over these last 8 games. And, you know, I don't know how much credit I want to give to Frank Reich. I don't know how much credit I want to give to Jonathan Taylor, because even this past game against Buffalo, like he didn't even top 200 passing yards because he didn't have to. He literally just handed it to Taylor and Taylor went bananas. So I just think this is one of those teams that you don't want to see in the playoffs because he is playing competently. They have a strong run game. And they're the type of defense that even though statistically they've given up a lot of touchdowns to a lot of different positions, they can force turnovers and can get to the quarterback. So I just think that the Colts are a team that we need to be starting to pay attention to as we're going into the playoff run. All right, Joe, next one. This one is down to the NFC East. And this one I feel like is you can lock it in right now. It almost feels poetic and feels like it's the narrative that we're waiting for. The Eagles apparently are going to win the NFC East. They've won 3 of the last 4. Run game is fantastic. Like, just to throw out some numbers, like against the Broncos, 212 rushing yards, 176 rushing yards on the Chargers, 242 just on the Saints this past weekend. And they've got a cream puff schedule the rest of the year. Giants twice, Washington twice, the Jets, and then the Cowboys to finish the year. Joe, is it apparent it is to you as it is to me? The Eagles are going to win the NFC East.
No, well, I do think that there's too much ground to make up for them. If the season was starting today, after what we've seen, you can make a case for that. But no, I still think it is the Cowboys. They built a nice little lead there. But I'll tell you what I like about the Eagles. I like how they've handled Jalen Hurts because they've given him time to be awful. They've given him time to be bad and to learn from it. You know, me as a Miami Dolphins fan, Tua has not been given that luxury. Take him in, put him out, take him out, but Hurts has had just some god-awful performances, and they're like, we're going to put him back in. We're not going to do this yo-yoing. They've given him opportunities to be bad, and he's gotten better, right? So Hurts is looking like a pretty good quarterback. I don't know if he's the quarterback of the future there, the long-term answer, but he's getting better, and that offense is completely built around him. He's got some pretty good playmakers. So the Eagles are kind of a fun team. I wouldn't be shocked if they could maybe sneak into the playoffs, right? Because that NFC is just wide open.
Right,
so maybe a wild card spot, but I don't think the division.
Well, the reason why, just kind of looking at the schedule, right? Like if the Cowboys continue to kind of play on a downward trend right now, especially coming up this Thursday. No Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb might not play as well. Tyron Smith, we talked about this before the show. He's likely to play, but again, if he's not, that's a big trickle-down effect that you've seen offensively for the Cowboys, where they're either just not able to run the ball as well, or Dak can't get enough protection. And it's almost one of those teams that, like, everybody's got to be on the roster for you to feel comfortable for them to cover a spread or win the game. And whenever you take one of those guys out of the equation, you just see that even though they have depth, it's just not the same for them the way that they move forward. And just looking at the remaining schedule, there are some losable games. In week 17, that game is going to be in Philadelphia. I just think that there's a good chance, like, again, just more so than what the odds are indicating. So we'll see. Also, just before we move on to some futures odds, I want to remind people that Jalen Hurts is a cash cow for rushing yard props right now. So I went back and looked. I've been betting him nearly every week, but he's hit the over on his rushing yard prop in 9 of 11 games this year. His over-under for rushing yards is always in between the 46 to 48 yards rushing, and he's averaging 56 yards per game of rushing. And he's done it over the last 4 games. And one of my favorite things about Jalen Hurts is that even though he obviously is a dual-threat quarterback and a running quarterback, you don't think of him like Lamar Jackson. But him and Lamar are the only 2 quarterbacks with over 600 yards rushing this year. The next quarterback is Josh Allen with 316. So I think people need to start kind of putting a little respect on Hurts' name. And Joe, before we move on, what a change of events, the fact that Tua, you would not think, like, with these 2 quarterbacks coming out of Alabama and the fact that one is excelling and one is, if you said, which one do you think is going to succeed? And Jalen is the one who's doing it, again, just blows my mind at this point and at this stage of their careers. All right, now, Joe, moving on to some futures odds here. We're going to be looking at the Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
Kansas City Chiefs right now sitting there at plus 700 to win the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes to win MVP at 11-1. Chiefs to get the 1 seed at 8-1, and Chiefs to win the AFC at plus 325. Joe, of these 4 for the Kansas City Chiefs, especially now after they've moved along, is there any of these 4 that you would feel comfortable laying a unit on?
Oh, 100% that Chiefs to get the number 1 seed. They're a game behind the team who leads the conference right now, the Tennessee Titans. And, they've won 4 straight. I could see them running the table here. Look at their remaining schedule. They got the Broncos, the Raiders, the Chargers, the Steelers, the Bengals, and then the Broncos again. I'd say they're going to be a favorite in every single one of those games. And even if they go, 1, 2, 3, 4, they could go 5-1. And I think that could put them in the position where they're going to be the number 1 seed. So absolutely, this defense has turned things around. 17-7, 14-9 points allowed in their last 4 games. And people can make excuses and say, well, Cowboys are top 2 receivers. Well, no, you still held them to under 10 points. That's still a pretty good offense, even with those guys out of the lineup. And it fits a bit of a pattern. Their Super Bowl year, 2019, they came out the first half of the season. That defense got absolutely lit up on a number of occasions. Then they made some adjustments to become one of the better defensive teams in the NFL when they won out that season all the way on the way to the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be one of the best defensive teams the rest of the season, but if they can be average with that offense, that might be all you need, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's the one bet immediately, like when I pulled these odds from BetMGM this morning, that was the one that immediately stood out to me as like, okay, I'm going to talk about that probably for sure. Just because if you look at their schedule, they have, I don't want to call it a cream puff schedule, but they're all winnable games, especially because they're all divisional games as well. I just can't really see them not at least winning the AFC West at this point. And Buffalo is just kind of trending downward, especially with a couple of games against the Patriots. And they've got the Bucs as well in the remaining schedule. So teams ahead of them, like a Baltimore or Buffalo, I think they can easily catch them. So, 1 seed for me at 8-1. If you're going to play the AFC or Super Bowl prop ones, I would just take the Super Bowl at 7-1 at this point, because I think that they're going to probably be, depending on who they play, I would say outside of the Buccaneers, they're likely going to be favored in that game as well. So you're getting better odds just from a Super Bowl standpoint. Joe, where'd you go? All right, well, we're going to keep moving on. Looking out at the next team, that would be the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts, for their futures odds, sitting at 35-1 after that win this past weekend. Colts to win the NFC or AFC at 16-1. Colts to win the division at 8-1, which is not as far-fetched as you think, even though they have lost both games against the Titans. And then, of course, Jonathan Taylor, who has just been a truck behind that offensive line, all the way down now to 20-1 to win NFL MVP. Now, Joe, of these 4, for me, the one that I would probably want to play is the Colts to win the AFC at 16-1, because I think no matter who they play in the NFC, they're going to be underdogs. And you could see that in the difference in the odds at the 35-1 to win the Super Bowl comparatively to the 16-1 to win the AFC. So for myself, I'm thinking the AFC would probably be the best bet because I think they have a road to be able to get there. Now, it's obviously going to have to go through teams like Buffalo and Kansas City and Baltimore. But we saw the Colts play these teams. Like they obviously just beat the crap out of the Bills. They pretty much should have beaten the Ravens. And we've seen them be able to go into Arrowhead in previous years and win games. So of those, I think the AFC is probably the best bet. Jonathan Taylor for NFL MVP, I probably wouldn't play that at this point just because, look, the deal is with the NFL MVP, as awesome as Jonathan Taylor has been, it's a quarterback award. And I think the one, I even watched Good Morning Football, and Kay Adams was going on about this this morning and talking about how Jonathan Taylor is a great candidate just from an MVP standpoint. And I think I just don't want to feed into that narrative because we saw last year when Derrick Henry ran for 2,000 yards and wasn't even a top 3 candidate to win MVP. The last time that a running back won MVP was back on was 2006. It was Adrian Peterson. He rushed for 2,000 yards, but part of the narrative of why he was able to do that was because he was coming off a torn ACL the year previous. And just pretty much most teams, or at least most voters, had written off the Vikings while also writing off Adrian Peterson and what kind of impact he could have made that upcoming year. So when I look at this, I'm immediately thinking Colts to win AFC, Super Bowl. I feel like you could just bet them as an underdog again with some of the winnings if you did get the 16-1. AFC South, I think, is going to be too difficult. That basically the margin for error is so slim. Basically, the Titans have to lose the rest of their games, and then the Colts have to win the rest of their games. I just think that's going to be too difficult of a margin of error to overcome. And then Jonathan Taylor, NFL MVP. Again, not to say that I don't think that he is worthy. I mean, he's already plus 200 to win NFL Offensive Player of the Year. But at NFL MVP odds, I just can't do it because I personally still think that with the remainder of the schedule, that Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes to a lesser extent is going to win the award. Kyler Murray has already missed too much time. Dak, I think, has too many duds in his season for this year. And just, I think the margin for error is just less for him. Like he has to basically play out of his mind to continue to get MVP steam. So of those, yeah, I'm going to go with Colts to win the AFC at 16-1. I think these are great odds. I think they're going to get in as a wild card. I think they're the type of team that can win on the road. They have shown that they can beat these type of teams. And if Jonathan Taylor is healthy and that offensive line is clicking, they're going to be a tough team to beat. And it's going to be one of those games that, like, the only way that you're going to beat them is that you have to outscore them and you have to put up like 35 to 40 points yourself. So that's it for the Colts. We're going to try now the Minnesota Vikings. So the Minnesota Vikings, a little bit of steam here now after beating the Packers. Again, they're right there in the wild card hunt. Their Super Bowl odds are 65-1. To make the playoffs is sitting at plus 150. To win the NFC is 35-1. And Vikings to win the NFC North at 6-1. Not exactly the odds aren't necessarily going to blow my skirt up at this point here. 65-1 just seems, again, it's just so difficult to envision them winning the Super Bowl. But if you're going to bet this prop, just the fact that I would rather take it at the NFC at 35-1, because if they face the Bills or the Chiefs or the Ravens, maybe to a lesser extent, they're going to be underdogs in that game, especially on the neutral field at SoFi Stadium. So I would maybe take the safer pick, especially when you're getting it at 35-1 to win the NFC. To make the playoffs even at plus 150, I'm surprised that it's plus odds, because right now if the playoffs were to start today, they are a playoff team. But I think that's the one thing, is that looking at their schedule and looking at some of the teams they have to play, that's going to be difficult. So I still like it at plus 150. I'm not going to take it to win the NFC North. I'm actually a little bit higher on the Packers probably than a lot of people. I think they're actually going to win the NFC this year and go to the Super Bowl after going to NFC championships for back-to-back years. So at this point, yeah, I think of those four for the Vikings, making the playoffs at plus 150 is probably the best bet to make. But the win the NFC would be the one that I would take at 35-1 over winning the Super Bowl, because I feel like if you get there already, you're going to be able to take some of those plus 3,500 winnings and be able to just put it on them as an underdog to win the Super Bowl at that point. And then NFC North, same thing. That's too much ground to cover just like the Colts like to win the division over the Titans. It's just too much ground to cover to catch the Packers at this stage. So, yeah, those are the three teams that I would be looking at futures with the Chiefs. I think the 1 seed at plus 800 is the best bet for them. Joe and I both agreed to that. To win the AFC at 16-1 for the Colts is the best bet for the Indy side. And for the Vikings, to make it the playoffs at plus 150, I think is the best way to go at that stage. So now Joe has decided to maybe take a little early dip on some jury duty. I think that was one of the things that he used to say when we were at Oddshark together, that he would always have to dip out for some jury duty. But I'm going to try to take the mantle here. I'm going to take a look at some of the Thanksgiving games, give you a little advice here on what we're looking at. And I'm already looking at Bears minus 3.5 versus the Lions. And the over-under for the Thanksgiving game as well is 41.5. So we're going to look at all three games right now. And when you look at this Bears-Lions side, it's difficult to Joe, welcome back.
I am back. My man, I'm sorry about that. I'm still on a dial-up internet connection here. Apparently, I don't know what happened there.
I said you stepped out for jury duty. That's usually what you told me before, is that if you had to leave early, you got to go to jury duty. So I figured that was where you were heading. But all we decide, I just, before we get to the Thanksgiving games, I just want to recap to people what I was saying is that for the Chiefs, we both agreed that the 1 seed at plus 800 is probably the best bet of those four.
I agree.
Then I looked at the Colts. Their four props were the Super Bowl odds, AFC odds, AFC South odds, and Jonathan Taylor MVP odds. My theory is that you would get the best odds for them to win the AFC at 16-1, comparatively to winning the Super Bowl at 35-1, mainly because if they get to the AFC or win the AFC championship, you're going to use some of those winnings from the 16-1 that you got and just put it on them as an underdog, because whoever they face in the NFC, doesn't matter what team it is, they're going to likely be an underdog in that spot. And I said the exact same thing for the Vikings, because right now the Vikings to win the NFC is 35-1. Winning the Super Bowl is 65-1. I just thought with such high odds to win the NFC at 35-1, if you're going to take it, just take that. And they're going to be an underdog likely against it, whether it be the Bills, Chiefs, Ravens, doesn't really matter. So that was kind of what I decided. I did let people know that I thought that the Jonathan Taylor MVP bet was not a great bet at this stage at plus 2,000, because you've pretty much lost all the value. Running back hasn't won MVP since 2006 with Adrian Peterson, coming off a torn ACL, making the playoffs, being picked not to make the playoffs. There was so much into that narrative of why they won the MVP. Before we get started with the Thanksgiving games, are there any futures that you would want to bet with the Colts or the Vikings?
You know, I don't mind that Jonathan Taylor 20-1 to win MVP. And we kind of talked about Carson Wentz, right? How he hasn't exactly been spectacular. He's taking care of the football and whatnot. But if you want to talk about, the award is supposed to be most valuable to your team, right? Mm-hmm. And, he's not going to have any more 5 touchdown games. It would be cool if he did. But, if he keeps this pace going down the stretch, and if the Colts keep winning, these awards that people vote for are very much narrative driven, right? Mm-hmm. So, you could hear these stories and, well, running back hasn't won MVP in so many years, and, that type of thing taking off. He keeps running it like he is. I don't mind that at 20-1. That's not too bad. And the Vikings are a funny team, right? They're better than their record indicates. They're in every game that they play in, right? Every game seems to be like a one-score game type of situation. They finally won one of those versus the Packers here this past week. But, I could see the Vikings. The Vikings are pretty scary offensively, right? And if that defense can get healthy down the stretch, I could see them making a little bit of noise here.
Well, they're in the playoff hunt right now. If the playoffs were to start today, they're in the playoffs. And right now they have plus odds to make the playoffs.
Yeah,
that's at plus 150. So not bad at all. You know that they got to play the Packers again, but this time it'll be in Lambeau, a little colder. It might be a little bit more of a difficult matchup. So that's why I was saying to win the NFC North at 6-1, I just thought it was too improbable. I felt like those odds should still be at like 10-1, just based on the difference in record. Just the fact that, the Packers, they probably should have won that game, in my opinion. But again, it just came down to whoever had the ball last. And I don't think that's going to be the case when they eventually play again at Lambeau. All right, so yeah, that would be it. And the only thing I was going to say with Jonathan Taylor, just at 20-1, it's really funny because if you look at his game logs, the first 3 games, he didn't do anything. And then they lost all those games. Since then, he's just been on a tear. He's scored in every game. So it is funny that you could look at it from a correlation standpoint of hey, if you gave Jonathan Taylor the ball more often, you'd probably win more games. So
sure.
that's obviously, that helps the narrative for that. So looking at the Thanksgiving games, Bears-Lions treated to a treat to kick off Thanksgiving. Bears -3.5 right now. The over-under is 41.5. I have some thoughts about this game, but Joe, before your internet poops out again, what do you think about this game, and what side total do you like out of this one?
Well, it's a low number, but maybe it's not low enough. I have no issue at all taking the under 41.5 here. So these teams have combined to go under in 70% of their games already this season. Bears games are averaging just 40.3 points. That's the average. You got to keep in mind that they played some much better offensive opponents than the Lions, right? The Lions are just super hot in terms of an under bet. They've gone under in 7 of their last 8, average combined score of just 38 points, 616 and 10 points scored over their last 3 games. Like, if Tim Boyle's starting again, there's nothing to like about this guy. 77 pass yards and 2 picks versus the Browns there on Sunday. Not very good. Both teams, like, those are trends though. But if you want to take a look at some stats, all the stats support it too, right? Both teams run the ball a lot. Chicago's second in the NFL in rushing play percentage. Detroit is 6th over the last 3 games, so they're running a lot more. So what does that mean? It means it keeps the clock moving, right? Then you look at some more of these stats here. Neither team can move the football. They're 31st and 29th in yards per play, 29th and 30th in third down conversion percentage. And if they can get in close, they're 27th and 30th in red zone TD conversion percentage. So if they do get in close, expect field goal attempts, not touchdowns, right? So, you know, the Lions defense stinks too. You could take that angle with it for sure. But my God here, Boyle versus the Red Rocket. That's what it's funny. I think about these Thanksgiving games, and sometimes people, it might be their first experience ever watching like a football game, right? It's funny when you get like a really bad Super Bowl, like Patriots versus Rams a couple of years ago. That's why I always think, like, this person, people are watching football for the first time. They must be thinking, this is what you guys go so crazy about? Bears-Lions. So yeah, under 41.5.
Well, I can't remember. Was it last year or was it the year before that we had the David Blau Chase Daniel game? I feel like that was either last. You know, it was just like, oh my God.
2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And these teams, they faced each other the last 4 seasons for Thanksgiving. And the Bears are 3-1 straight up, 2-1-1 against the spread. Don't really know how much you want to use that. It's pretty small sample size. I mean, the total is 2-2, but the average combined score in those games is like right around 43. I mean, both teams average like 16 points per game. Like, and it would be not uncommon to watch these teams just run past kick, like just over and over again, just basically not being able to move the ball. I mean, right now, just kind of thinking of early touchdown scores. I was talking about this with our producer before the show, but David Montgomery to score 2 or DeAndre Swift to score 2. They're both at like plus 400 and plus 700 around those ranges. That's probably the only ones that I would look at because I don't trust either quarterback to throw the ball either. So that's kind of where we're at. So, all right, we're going to move to game number 2, and it's got my Cowboys in it, of course. Another traditional thing of watching my Cowboys get the crap kicked out of them pretty much on a national holiday. And they're 7.5-point favorites over the Raiders with a total of 50.5. Joe, not really feeling either of these sides, but I've got a little bit of thought here. I mean, just to let people know, I'm going to probably be taking the under in that Bears-Lions game. But for this game, you got any leans for sides and totals in the Cowboys-Raiders?
Yeah, I like a same game teaser for this one, and I also like the over in this one. So anyone who follows me knows that I like betting these teaser bets, and sometimes you can find some good same game ones. Some people don't like teasing totals, but I've had some success with it here. So I would tease the Cowboys down to 1.5 and get the over down to 45.5. Or if you don't like betting that way, I don't mind the over 50.5 points in this one. Now, I know the Cowboys are probably going to be down their top 2 receivers, and they looked really bad against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday, but making in-game adjustments when you lose a CD Lamb who had been upgraded to, you know, the number 1 guy, that's much more difficult than having 4 days to prepare. So you could see them getting the tight ends much more involved in the passing game and maybe the running backs as well. But take a look at Cowboys' home games so far this season. You've seen an average combined score of 56.4 in those games. Both teams are great at moving the football, 4th and 1st in yards per play. Both stink in the red zone defensively, 31st and 24th at opponent red zone TD conversion percentage. So if they get in close, expect touchdowns, not field goal attempts. To support the Raiders case here, so the Raiders lead the NFL in passing plays of 20-plus yards. Dallas is really bad in this area defensively, tied for the 5th most passing plays of 20-plus yards. So big chunks of yards in a short period of time for the Raiders. And, you know, the Cowboys, we just seen them bounce back there 2 weeks ago. They had that lousy letdown performance versus the Broncos. Then they come out the next week. They put up 45 on the Atlanta Falcons, and this Raiders defense is just absolutely crumbling right now. Who can blame them? Who can blame that team for struggling right now? But yeah, I could see a high-scoring game with Dallas at least winning the game outright.
Yeah, I think for me, if I had to make any bet, it would just be on the over. I think the Cowboys defense is overrated. I think a lot of the time we get too caught up in the highlights of Trayvon Diggs and Micah Parsons to not realize that they still give up big chunk plays like you were mentioning. And I think that was the one thing that it was difficult for me as a Cowboys fan to say that out loud when they're 6-1 and people are ready to pop the corks on the champagne about whether we're going to win the Super Bowl this year. And it's like, guys, like, you know, we're still getting exploited defensively, just offensively. Dak's playing out of his mind. And then you see the trickle-down effect when you don't have Amari Cooper, when you don't have Tyron Smith, like how quickly things just kind of quickly fall apart. And it almost like seems like with the Cowboys offense, as explosive as they can be, it's almost like everybody's got to be on the field and everything's got to go right for them to look formidable. And that's one of the things I worry about, is that when things aren't going right, you get a game like that against Kansas City or against Denver where they just look completely inept. So I'd probably, over 50.5 right now would probably be the one. Probably would take Raiders plus 7.5 just because it's over that key number. But at the same time, I don't really feel great either way on the side. Moving on to the final game, Joe, Bills-Saints. Bills minus 4.5 on the road at the Caesars Sports Dome, and the over-under 46.5. Joe, I've got an idea of what I want to bet on this one. I just wanted to hear what your thoughts are first so I can copy you word for word.
Yeah, different type of bet for me on this one. I'm going to take the Saints team total over 20.5 points. Now, I'm going back to the well. I took the Colts team total over 21 based on my thoughts that the Bills defense was and is extremely overrated based on playing a real cupcake schedule. But a couple numbers here to support the Saints going over that 20.5 number. So they've topped that in 8 of 10 games so far this season. They've been pretty good at putting up points when Trevor Siemian's been the quarterback, 36, 25, 21, and 29 points. So they've gone over that number in all 4 games that Siemian has started in. Saints offense has been much more efficient at home. Not that big of a shock, right? 27.3 points per game, averaging more yards per play, converting more on third down and second in time of possession. And the last 2 respectable offenses that the Bills have played, 41 to the Colts on Sunday and 34 to Tennessee a couple of weeks before. And you could look at all the stats and say, hey, Bills are, top 5 in a lot of these key defensive stats. And it's like, well, look who they played. Ben Roethlisberger, they played Miami twice, Heineke, Davis Mills, Lawrence, Mike White. So yeah, I don't know, man. Both of these teams are a bit confusing to me right now. The Bills haven't looked very good down the stretch here lately. I mean, we all know that they lost to the Jaguars there. Like, congratulations on beating up the Jets, right? But then you look at the Saints. They've been fantastic as an underdog, 8-1-1 against the spread in their last 10 as a home underdog. You can't base everything off a trend, but we do see that team get undervalued quite a bit.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it's not to say that I don't think the Saints won't put up points. I just think that the Bills offense is just, I feel like maybe we're kind of getting lead off the path of like actually how good they could be specifically when passing the ball. And I think it's really come down to Josh Allen. I think defensively as well, one of the things that we missed last week, and you saw it with the way that Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox, even though they weren't really getting the passes, they were exploiting the middle on the Bills because their all-pro linebacker Tremaine Edmonds didn't play, and when he doesn't play, like the Bills defense is just, it's significantly worse. So if he doesn't play this week against the Saints, I think that's going to be the issue. I think that's going to be what you're going to see, why the Saints are going to put up maybe 25 to 30 points as a result. But I still do think that we're going to see probably an ass kicking by the Bills, just because I think they're going to just start throwing the ball way more. And what you're going to see is Marcus Lattimore is just going to be locked up with Stephon Diggs. And then it's just going to be the Emmanuel Sanders show. Emmanuel Sanders revenge game, by the way.
All right.
I just wanted to bring that
Man,
up.
I hope you're dead wrong. I would love nothing more to see the Buffalo Bills totally collapse here. It's Bills had a great season last year, and everyone just automatically crowned them, right? And all the Bills fans, all of a sudden, so arrogant about Josh Allen, making fun of me for Tua and his struggles. Do you forget the first 2 seasons of the Josh Allen experience?
I do not.
Did not go very good. Did it, Bills fans? So let's give Tua a little bit of time, right? He probably won't be on the Dolphins next year. He'll be looking good in a Houston Texans jersey, I'm sure.
Now, the question is, would you trade Tua for Josh Allen straight up?
Yes. I mean, Josh Allen has proved he's able to be elite over the course of an entire season, so he's much closer to a sure thing than Tua is. I'm not a total idiot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just wanted to make sure to overcorrect, just make sure to let people know that even though you think the Bills are regressing and you want to see them blow up, let's just make sure that we're on the same page here. All right, Joe, we got to wrap this up. I'm going to do a quick rapid fire Q&A with you to kind of end the show, and then I believe you're going to go get a haircut. I think that's
I got to get a haircut. So. My hair's getting too long, but yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I hear you. I know what you're saying.
No kidding.
But I just haven't made it there yet. It's been almost 2 years. So, all right, Joe, let's get going. First question. Joe, when you were on the show the first time, you said the Browns were winning the AFC North. Do you still believe that entering Week 12?
I think that division is still very much wide open. I'll stick with it. I'm not as confident, though.
Okay. As a fellow Canadian, Joe, what kind of food will you be indulging on for Thursday for American Thanksgiving?
I get fried chicken. I go to Kentucky Fried Chicken it's a little tradition of my own that I have, and it's just an excuse to pig out, right?
Absolutely love it. If you can't have turkey, you got to have some sort of bird. Might as well be a dirty bird. So next question, Joe, true or false? You like to greet all guests who arrive to your house with a shot of vodka.
I remember doing that to you, and I was surprised when you took me up on it many years ago. And I remember you not feeling too well afterwards. I was very shocked. It was some cheap vodka I had, but I haven't done that for a while, but I should do it more often.
To give a little backstory, a running joke that Joe and I have is whenever I visit his house, he'll at least offer me. He'd be like, "Hey, would you like a shot of vodka?" It's just his customary way of saying welcome to the place. I don't have to take it if I don't want to. The first time, though, I did take it, and as a result, that's what happens. So, all right, next question, Joe. Mac Jones or Trevor Lawrence? Which quarterback would you rather have over the next 5 years?
Also go with Trevor Lawrence, right? Like Mac Jones is obviously in a much better situation in terms of how the team has used him and built around him. But Trevor Lawrence, he was the #1 overall pick for a reason, and he has looked fantastic at times. He's in an awful situation, though. Yeah, I'd stick with Lawrence.
Joe, if someone offered you free season tickets for life to the Miami Dolphins, but as part of the deal, you had to tell everyone you meet on game day about how great the Dexter reboot is, would you take them?
Well, why would I want to spend every other Sunday at watching Miami Dolphins football live? No, thank you. No interest in that. The Dexter reboot's not bad. I'm only two episodes in so far, and it's not blowing me away, but it's not bad either. But I would probably have to decline.
I just picture you being like at the Miami Dolphins, like the show was shot in Miami, right? All right, Joe. Final question: can you please explain to everyone the incredible annoyance a homeowner suffers through while watching somebody use their driveway to turn around? Floor is yours.
Yeah, I live in somewhat of a halfway busy street at least, and it seems like 3 times a week I'll be watching TV in the living room, and all of a sudden a glare of headlights coming into the house, and I get up and look, and some moron is using my driveway to turn around because he got lost, right? So why should I have to suffer? Why should my evening be interrupted because some guy gets turned around and doesn't know where he's going? So that's something I don't appreciate.
Just note that if you ever find out where Joe lives, do not use his driveway to turn around. He will be very annoyed with you. All right, now before we go, Joe, can you tell the folks at home how they can find your work and what you've got going on?
Yeah, a lot of it's just over on, I post everything I do on my Twitter account, JTFOZ. On Twitter, I do a daily YouTube video Monday through Friday. Head on over to YouTube, find the OddsShark page. Make sure you are subscribing. I'm covering heavy on NBA, of course, NFL right now, baseball, UFC. Haven't really dipped into hockey yet. That could be coming when football ends, though. But yeah, everything's on Twitter. And you can find some more of my stuff over at oddshark.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all from me. I want to thank Joe Osborne of OddsShark joining me today on Dog Day afternoon. Just like him, all my writing content is over at FTNBets.com. You can catch me as well every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern for Touchdown Town, where I give out my best touchdown scores of the week. I want to thank you for watching Dog Day afternoon. I'm Gilles Gallant with BetsTV. Bon chance.